the top 3 firewall configuration mistakes that we've seen in 2025. Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from the Security Operations Center at Ontoit, we bring you the next episode. And the subject of today is firewall misconfigurations. Let's get on to it. Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity. Let me introduce my guest of today. I'm really thrilled he is here. His name is Jelle Konings, and he is a security optimization specialist here at the Security Operations Center at Ontoit. Jelle, welcome.
Thank you.
What does a security optimization specialist do?
It's actually quite broad. So what I do in a day-to-day business is that I help our customers to go to the next level within cybersecurity.
So it's really, you do. So that's why we actually invited you here, because you know a lot of things about a lot of different and really in-depth knowledge. So, and what we're going to talk about today is, I mean, you look at firewall configurations a lot, especially if there's a new customer and we inherit some kind of a configuration that we're then managing after that. And you made the top 3 of things that go wrong, that you see in real world implementation with organizations that should be that you immediately start improving.
Yeah.
What's the first one?
So talk about things that I actually see. The first one should be visibility. Like a lot of customers don't have visibility in a major part of their network, like not having logging on security policies, or not even having a IDS system, like a detection system for known vulnerabilities. So you have a lack of visibility actually.
When we're talking about firewalls these days, we talk about next-gen firewalls.
Yes.
That includes IPS technology, anti-malware signature, all that. And what you're saying is they have a lack of visibility. Why? Is the firewall in the wrong place, or?
It might be that the firewall is in the wrong place, but often it's just a configuration issue. So they don't even enable the feature that will start logging whenever something happens.
Oh, really?
It might be just a connection. Host A talks to host B. Or it might actually be a vulnerability that should be seen, but it's not even checked for.
Mm-hmm. So many organizations are allowing traffic without it being possible to look at log files to see it.
Yeah.
This sounds like a easy fix. At least it costs you nothing. Right?
It will.
Because you simply configure the feature then.
Yeah, so often they already pay for it because they have the license to actually look into the traffic and inspect it.
Mm-hmm.
It is not an easy way to just implement it. You always want to have a situation where you analyze the data, see what is going on. If I am going to enforce any security measures, what is the impact going to be? So I have a period where we will analyze that traffic, and then we can enable it afterwards.
Okay, and could it be a resource issue? Like if you enable the logging or enable the IPS, that the throughput goes down or the CPU spikes, or can traffic be harmed then if you enable it?
Well, if you do an additional inspection on traffic, if you compare that to a firewall doing, let's say, 1 gig of firewall throughput, then there will be some reduction in throughput because you enable additional features and you are actually inspecting that traffic. But the firewall should be designed for that network with that in mind as well.
But you can know this up front, I imagine. You can just simply see what the load is of the firewall. So if you look at it, you will know it's safe for me to enable this.
Yeah, that's definitely something we take into account. Yeah.
Well, this is actually a bad thing that it doesn't exist, but I'm really happy because there's a very good solution for it. Huh?
Yeah.
So what's your number 2?
My number 2 is actually user ID.
User ID?
Yeah, it's often not being used. It identifies a user. So the ID stands for identification. In this case, the firewall will know an IP address and will be able to map it to a user. And it will also utilize a group mapping where it will actually map that user to a domain group.
So and why? How do you use this information in a firewall then? If you give that knowledge, so instead of IP XYZ, you can say Jelle Konings, for example. But so why is that useful?
So twofold. So the first one is to have more information in your logging, so you actually know this user triggered the threat instead of IP address triggered the threat. If you want to follow up on it, it's way easier to talk to the user than to figure out via DHCP logs, for example, when was that IP acquired, who is that user. So that's one, and that's just visibility. So it also relates to the first point. And the second point is enforcing user ID. So I want to be able to already enforce on the first packet that this user is allowed to make this connection instead of relying on the system that I'm moving towards. Let's say I'm going to a destination server that is a host that I'm connecting to with RDP. I want to have my firewall already double check, is this user allowed to use RDP towards this firewall?
So the firewall is a kind of authentication then?
So it doesn't do the authentication itself, but it validates it. So is the logged in user, I already have that IP mapping, and at that point it will be a supportive system to that already. So I don't have to rely on the host.
Yeah, so I can imagine that in a next generation firewall, you can make a rule that says this RBAC group, so this role, let's say the finance department members, this allow rule only triggers for those users, and it gives you access to your financial software, whatever. Which then means that if someone who's not in that department tries to connect, the packet will not even arrive at the server, which is like far more secure than relying on that. Probably vulnerable. Well, probably. I mean, we see a lot. It's hard to make sure that all authentication systems on all servers in your organization have no flaws.
Correct.
Are completely patched, don't have contain bugs, no misconfigurations, etc.
Correct.
So it's really powerful then.
Yeah, it does rely on one thing though, because we say we have a allow policy.
I was about to be really happy about this whole thing.
We're not there yet, because the third item I actually want to go to is a default deny.
Okay.
If you don't have a default deny, but then.
Okay, I know a thing or two. Let me pause you for a second. So what you're saying is that you see firewall rule sets that do not have a default deny at the end?
Correct.
Really?
Yes.
So explain why that's a very bad practice.
From a firewall perspective, you only want to allow specifically what you want to allow. So the first rule in your firewall rule base, when you design a rule base, should be the last rule in the rule base actually, is your default deny. I am denying everything by default. And then specifically when I want to allow the finance group to my finance software, I will create an allow policy for that. And at that point, I know that if I don't have a user within that finance group, it will only hit that default deny. If I don't have that default deny, it might still allow it due to default policies that are already present or other broadly defined
because
allow
what happens
policies.
if you don't have a default deny policy? What happens with traffic that doesn't hit a rule?
It depends a bit on the firewall vendor, but some actually have default policies that will allow interzone traffic. Dus if you're coming from zone LAN and you have another resource within that same zone, it will by default be allowed.
Yeah, so all internal traffic then is allowed by default, for example. Yeah. Or not logged, or all the
not logged, but allowed, even worse. Yeah.
But imagine that. I mean, you mentioned the visibility. That's easy to fix, right? User ID a little bit less because you need to go through all the rules to make them more specific.
Yep.
But default deny sounds like that's a real hassle if you don't have it. How you fix this for a living, right?
Correct.
How do you start?
A lot of logs. So you want to have the visibility first, so you actually see what is going on, because you need to know what kind of logs are currently being allowed by policies that shouldn't allow them. Like we discussed, the default policy that allows traffic from LAN to LAN, for example. Yeah. I want to make sure it's logging enabled on it.
Yeah. So you make the very permissive rule at the end very explicit and make sure that at least it logs.
Yeah, because then I can analyze the traffic logs and see what is currently being allowed. At that point, I start creating policies that are still broadly defined, but will already start denying certain traffic flows that I know after discussion with the customer, this is not according to design, it shouldn't be there, and then we will activate those policies.
So you hash out all the real world traffic into, this is actually good, we need to make the rule explicit, and this needs to go, so let's put a specific deny rule in there for now, and when you're done, you can probably replace the specific denies with your ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Your default deny rule. And then the typical organization, how long does it take to get there?
It really depends. Some will be fixed in weeks and some will be fixed in months. And sometimes it even takes more than a year, depending on the engagement and the complexity of the environment.
So it's really, it's good that we have security optimization specialists then in our team. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's 3.
Yeah. I have another one, though.
Oh, really? Oh, so I should have said the top 4 then.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, really? So tell me about it.
The 4th one I have is actually port-based firewall rules.
Okay.
And what I mean with that is that we have a next generation firewall, which has a lot of magic happening in the box. It's almost sort of a black box. And one of those items is application identification. So it's able to distinguish TCP traffic on port 443 if it actually is TLS or RDP using as well, like these kind of things. And I want to make sure that we have app-based policies in there, so we only allow what we need to allow.
Okay, so what you mean is that if you put in you're talking port-based rules, you're talking about the old days in which your firewall you would always specify indeed port 80 for web, port 443 for SSL, port 53 for DNS, etc.
Yes.
And you're saying we shouldn't really do that anymore. I mean, it's part of it maybe, but it's not enough. We should also specify what the app is that is supposed to run over this port.
Correct.
So why is this in terms of security then? What could happen if we don't?
If I have a security policy that allows my employees to connect to the internet over port 443 and not specify an application that allows any application using port 443 is allowed to go to the internet. Even though my intention might be to allow them to go to google.com, I also allow them to set up any other application using that port. And I think the most riskful in this case will be that a user might be able, or an attacker, once they have access to your network, is able to set up a VPN tunnel to the outside on a non-default port. Maybe the default is port 445. And they're using 443 now to actually allow traffic to the outside.
Yeah. So you can leak files easily. So you're, as a firewall administrator, you're assuming, hey, I'm giving all these nice people in my organization access to their Gmail accounts or their web browsing, etc. But in fact, you're also unintentionally, typically, allowing basically everything.
Correct.
Yeah, because especially if they're a little bit skilled. But don't you have to be skilled in order to do that, or do you have to be a skilled attacker to exploit this, or is there also the regular user who can abuse it?
I don't think you have to be that skilled. There's a lot of tutorials online on how to set up a VPN tunnel because often people use it to, let's say, go to a different region of Netflix. Nowadays, it's so easy to deploy it. So even the normal average user could use VPNs.
Like the commercial VPN or VPN people or companies actually allow you to do anything you want in that sense, and then that means you can leak all the documents in your own organization. So the insider threat is a real thing then, because it makes it so easy to leak all your internal stuff without a trace.
Yeah, because it's encrypted. So the VPN tunnel is encrypted, meaning the firewall.
Is this easy to do? How would you change? Because so typically, if you inherit a firewall rule set, what's your estimated percentage of rules that have app IDs?
It depends a bit, but often what we see is between 30 to 40% of, and we call it the amplification rate for the security policies. And our target is always 60 to 80% of amplification.
Why not 100?
It's not. We would love 100, but there are situations where you have catch policies with a port-based fallback. So you initially have application-based policies, and then you clone that policy and you remove the applications to have a fallback on a port-based. And it's often because traffic can't always be specifically distinguishable, and then you have unknown TCP traffic, for example. So
there's a certain limit in the app ID engine because I can imagine there's thousands and thousands of apps that have to be in there, and they change, of course. So there's always you can't be perfect.
And you don't want to have your core systems go down because an app ID signature changed. So you want to have these fallback scenarios and then be alerted once such a policy is being hit, so you can actually fix it.
You go, okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Jelle. This was really insightful. I won't keep you any longer from this important job to fix all these rule sets that you encounter. Small prediction: we said this is your top 4. It's actually great. There's 4 problems in the top 3 of errors. But will 2026 be any? We are well in 2026 now. Any better?
I don't think so.
Oh, really?
I think I will still encounter these. But we will definitely help customers to get to that point where they don't have
firewall, you're making the world a little bit safer.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To our audience, thank you very much for tuning in. If you liked what you saw today, well, please reward us with a like. We'd appreciate that. And real close to there is the subscribe button. So next time you will have a similar video in your inbox as well. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.